Good morning or good afternoon to everybody, and welcome. Miriam, Machashik Shot Noam Adam Geisler, Noam Lanoina Bayom Guijimachish. Good morning or good afternoon, no matter where you reside. My name is Adam Geisler. I'm an enrolled member of the La Jolla Band of Luiseño Indians and a citizen of the tribe. I'm coming to you live today from my traditional homelands of the Bayom Guichim people. Located here in Southern California, where I have the opportunity to be able to moderate this discussion today on behalf of NTIA, where I am on loan over to NTIA from a program within the Department of Commerce called FirstNet. So today, for those of you that are dialing in that have seen my face and some other members of the team on some of our other calls, we are working together with the United States Department of Treasury and NTIA to bring forward this webinar today in a joint process to discuss the Corona Capital Projects Fund as it relates to broadband services. So before we dive too far in, I do want to just highlight a couple of housekeeping items. Number one is that this session is being recorded today, and so I did want to point out to everybody that the session is being recorded, so please keep in mind for those of you that aren't aware the session is being recorded. Also, as we move along through the conversation today, and you'll hear me say this a little bit more in the opening remarks, we are going to ask that as you think through questions that you may have about the program and any details around the Treasury's Capital Projects Fund, that you go ahead and place those questions in the question box, and we'll work our way through those. So again, welcome to the U.S. Treasury Department and NTIA's webinar on the Capital Projects Fund. We appreciate you spending the next hour with us as we provide you with an overview of the Treasury Capital Project Fund guidance and the application process, as well as outline key dates and milestones, and answer questions you may have about the program that is housed over with Treasury. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with this particular program, Treasury launched the program on September 20th by releasing guidance for recipient governments, which provides key details on use of the funds and the application process itself. And Treasury opened the application portal for tribal governments on October 1st. So one of the things that I did want to point out is that in the chat, the link to the guidance, one of the team members is going to be placing a link in the chat if you haven't had a chance to familiarize yourself with that guidance. So in addition to the September 20th date with the release of the guidance and the open portal that happened on October 1st, let's talk a little bit about today. So today we will also use the webinar as a way to introduce the Treasury team for those of you that hadn't had an opportunity to meet the folks over at Treasury, as well as get a sense of how they will be supporting you all throughout the process as you apply. As you can tell, again, I'm here on behalf of NTIA, and NTIA and Treasury have actually partnered on this program to improve our ability to respond to tribal needs and to work across government, as many of you have shared in the past in the correspondence and feedback that you have provided. Throughout this webinar and this experience, both Treasury and NTIA will be available to answer your questions and provide support around the Corona Capital Project Fund. So with that being said, please feel free to reach out to either group, knowing that we will work together to make sure you are connected with the right team and receive the answers that you need around this particular pot of funding. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So a little bit about the webinar. I think one thing to keep in mind as the team moves their way, the Treasury team moves their way through the slides today, is that the intent is to summarize the guidance. You know, naturally, the team won't be able to cover all the details. And so again, we're going to encourage you to take a look at the more detailed guidance. Should you have additional questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat. But we do want to point you to the fact that we're going to try to give an overview of something that's pretty detailed today, and like you'll have questions. So again, please feel free to read that guidance. Let's go on to the next slide. So on the agenda today, we're going to provide, the Treasury team is going to provide a brief overview of the fund, followed by a deeper look into the use of the funds, which I know all of you are really curious about, a walkthrough on how to apply for funding, which I think you will appreciate, some high-level points about reporting requirements, and then move into the question and answer portion or segment. So again, throughout the webinar, feel free to type your questions into the question box, and we will take time at the end of the webinar to answer a few of those questions. Also keep in mind that we may not have answers to every single question or be able to get to every single question that you have today, but know that the team and Treasury will do their best to respond in a timely manner, and do so by posting an FAQ to the website, or by working with you one-on-one should you have any specific, more detailed questions into the future. So before we get too far, I do want to just stop for a moment and acknowledge the start by allowing or requesting that Treasury provide some opening remarks from one of the members of their team over at Treasury. And so we are fortunate today to have the acting director of the Corona Capital Project Fund, Ms. Dana McKenzie, from the U.S. Department of Treasury, to start us off with some opening remarks. So Dana, with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Adam. Just confirming that you can hear me, Adam.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect, thank you. And I apologize, I am not on video, some technical difficulties today, but hopefully we will have follow-up opportunities to meet more face-to-face and in person. But I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today. And as Adam said, my name is Dana McKenzie, and I am currently serving as the Interim Director for the Capital Projects Fund. And the team is on the call today, and we are excited to be here with all of you to discuss the launch of the Capital Projects Fund, one of the many funding opportunities within the Treasury's Office of Recovery Programs. Some of you may have already worked with some of the other funding programs that is part of the portfolio of projects that we belong to. But on behalf of the entire Treasury Department, I want to express our thanks for not only joining us today, but also for the work that you all are doing to help drive recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Before we dive into more details about the CPF fund specifically and the steps to take in order to access this funding, I wanted to take a minute to introduce you to the Office of Recovery Programs, which Secretary Yellen created earlier this year to manage Treasury's implementation of relief and recovery efforts, including those established by the American Rescue Plan. Since President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan into law a little over 6 months ago, Treasury has distributed about $700 billion to support American families, small businesses, and state, local, and tribal governments. Today, we're here to discuss a new program that we are particularly excited about at Treasury for its opportunity to invest in a more equitable recovery for all communities moving forward. And as we've said, that is the Capital Projects Fund, which you will often hear us talk about as the CPF fund once you get to know us and the team a little bit better. As you all know, COVID-19 has underscored many underlying needs, including the importance of universally available, high-speed, reliable, and affordable broadband access, as millions of Americans rely on the internet to participate in critical activities like distance learning, remote work, and access to health care and health monitoring. This is particularly true for tribal communities who prior to the pandemic faced significant obstacles to broadband deployment and other connectivity infrastructure, and these existing vulnerabilities were only exacerbated by the current crisis. The Capital Projects Fund team is here today to share more information about how to access these funds, as Adam referenced earlier, that tribal governments can use to help members of your communities to reach good jobs, provide a quality education for your children, and access many critical services like healthcare today, and should we need the resilience for future pandemic or emergency situations. In addition to our direct partnership with NTIA, Treasury has a team of experienced tribal staff in place with the Office Recovery Programs to help with this implementation. So they are another resource that you or we can tap as we work our way through making sure that you have access to these funds. As you use these funds to drive economic recovery in your communities in the months and years to come, Treasury will remain focused and dedicated to providing support where it is needed. And so we are always in listening mode when it comes to that. So please keep that in mind and reach out when there is a need. Thank you for your continued partnership. With that, Adam, we have an awkward transition here because I'm going to pass the ball to you and you're going to pass it back to me, I think.
You always got to love scripts, right, Dana? I appreciate the transition, and I just on behalf of the team at NTIA, I was asked to provide a few remarks, and so I guess one thing that I just wanted to share on behalf of NTIA is that we have heard you loud and clear, Indian country, in terms of government collaborating and working together. And so today, what you are seeing is a collaboration between the U.S. Department of Treasury and NTIA, in particular around the Capital Projects Fund. While this particular program and pot of money is managed and housed within the Department of Treasury and has its separate and distinct, and I want to say that again, separate and distinct application process, NTIA is here to support it because broadband is an eligible activity, and they're going to get into the nuts and bolts of that today. And we wanted to be available and supportive to our federal partners, brothers and sisters across departments, when opportunities arise where there is a complementary activity around broadband. The other thing that I just wanted to share is for those of you that have been tracking the program that we've been running over at NTIA, the reality is that we have, it's an exciting day. We received 301 applications for our program, totaling over $5 billion worth of requests, which is great to be able to demonstrate the need that Indian country has around broadband as a whole. However, we have $1 billion in our program. And with that being said, the reality is that over at NTIA, we will likely only be able to fund about 17%. Again, we have $1 billion. The ask is over 5. And so we wanted to look how we could partner with other departments that have resources and promote those resources across Indian country. And so today, that is what we're here to do. NTIA has partnered with the U.S. Department of Treasury. Again, I want to underscore that what they're going to go through is a separate and distinct program with its own guidance, its own application process, but know that we are here to help support and facilitate how we can folks that have questions as they navigate the process with Treasury to access the funds that are going to be discussed. So with that, Dana, on behalf of NTIA, we do want to thank the Department of Treasury for the partnership and the collaboration and trying to have a one government approach as it comes to addressing the needs of Indian country, access to funds, and solving the digital divide. And so with that, Dana, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you and your team. And again, really appreciate the partnership and collaboration.
Fantastic. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, thank you, Adam. And the partnership is particularly valuable as one of the things that we heard in the consultation process was simplifying the points of contact and how and who our tribal partners talk to about how to access these funds. So we absolutely appreciate how NTIA is helping us streamline that to as much as we are able. And so thank you for that, Adam. The next job for me on this webinar is to talk to you at the highest level about the capital projects program itself. And then I will invite other members of our team to share more detailed information about the eligible uses of fund, to walk us through some of the application process and reporting requirements, and then we will take some of your questions through the chat box as Adam alluded to earlier, but we are likely not able to get through everything today, and the team will circle back and get everyone answers to any questions that we're not able to answer. And I would encourage you to add those questions as soon as they come to mind, and we will start teeing them up to address as we finish up with our formal walkthrough of the items that I just listed. So with that, the next slide talks about how Congress approved this $10 billion fund under the American Rescue Plan to provide funding for governments to build critical capital projects to aid their response to the pandemic. A key priority of this program is to make funding available to recipients if they choose for reliable, affordable broadband infrastructure and other digital connectivity technology projects. This is why there was such a natural partnership between Treasury and NTIA on these two programs. This program has shown us that just like electricity, and we all know this well, broadband infrastructure is indispensable for accessing critical services and participating in many aspects of daily life, including remote access to work, remote access to health monitoring and our doctors, and remote access to our classrooms and distance learning. Treasury published the CPF program guidance on September 20th, and as you all likely know, and has already been mentioned here, began accepting applications from the tribal governments last week, and we have been excited to see those applications starting to come into the portal. The Capital Projects Fund makes $100 million in funding available to tribal governments and the state of Hawaii for Native Hawaiian programs, with each tribal government allocated about $167,000. There are three main goals of this fund. First is recovery. The fund provides eligible governments with an infusion of resources to meet their capital investment needs as part of their COVID-19 recovery. This is designed to complement the larger $350 billion state and local fund, which you likely have all also been working on allocating. The second goal is equity. As Secretary Yellen has said, long before COVID infected a single individual, we were living in an economy where certain segments of the population were falling further and further behind. This fund aims to address these inequities by improving access to critical services in communities with a critical need. And third is lasting infrastructure. This fund aims to contribute to the administration's goal to provide modern infrastructure necessary to access critical services, including broadband access, and do so in a robust and long-term fashion. This next slide provides us an overview of the eligibility criteria under the Capital Projects Fund. The Capital Project Fund statute provides that funding can be used to carry out critical capital projects directly enabling work, education, and health monitoring, including remote options in response to the public health emergency in respect to COVID-19. And that is and you see the actual words of the statute on the slide on the screen. The Capital Projects Fund is available for projects that meet all three of the following criteria. So these are helpful to keep in mind as you're thinking about your how to allocate these funds. First, the funding must be used for capital assets designed to directly and jointly enable work, education, and health monitoring. All three of those activities must be present for an investment in a capital asset to qualify. Second, the project must be designed to address a critical need that resulted from, was made apparent by, or exacerbated by COVID-19. In other words, keeping in mind that the project that you design for use with the CPF funds has a direct connection to the COVID-19 emergency. And third, the project must be designed to address a critical need of the community that will be served by it. To simplify the process for eligible governments, Treasury identified several use categories that are presumptively eligible so long as they align with the terms and standards outlined in the guidance. Eligible governments may wish to pursue other projects that meet the statutory requirements as well, and someone on the team will talk us through the application process for these projects later on in the webinar. I am now going to hand it over to a colleague to talk through presumptively eligible and presumptively ineligible use categories.
Thank you, Dana. My name is Gang. I work on the capital projects team here at Treasury, and it's great to be here with all of you today to share more about the program. So, As Dana mentioned, we simplified the process by identifying some use categories for funding. This slide here outlines those categories, which are also identified by the guidance. Projects that are considered to be presumptively eligible, projects that will undergo case-by-case review, and projects that are presumptively ineligible. And Treasury's goal here was to issue guidance that is effective and clear and explains how tribal governments can choose to use capital projects fund grants to best address the challenges that they face. We held extensive consultations with recipients and stakeholders, including many of you, and we have taken this feedback into account in preparing the program guidance. And Treasury's approach simplifies the process for recipients that want to pursue presumptively eligible uses, such as broadband infrastructure projects and digital connectivity technology projects, while providing recipients flexibility to address critical needs within their communities. And so what I will do is I'll walk through each use category, beginning with eligible uses of funds. First, let's talk about broadband infrastructure projects. As we've previously mentioned, a key priority of this program is to provide funds to recipients if they choose to make investments in high quality and affordable broadband infrastructure, which we believe is an eligible use. Treasury simplified the application process for tribal governments that want to use capital projects fund money to pursue broadband infrastructure investments that meet the standards outlined in the guidance and highlighted on this slide. The standards are as follows. First, while Treasury encourages recipients to invest in areas without access to reliable wireline speeds of 120 megabits, it provides broad flexibility for recipients to determine communities with a critical need for build out. And second here on the eligible project standards, projects must be designed to reliably deliver speeds of 100 megabits symmetrical be presumptively eligible for capital project funding, unless that's impracticable. And recipients are required to ensure that completed service offerings funded by the fund allow subscribers in the service area to utilize the FCC's EBB program, the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. Now, some examples of broadband projects that are presumptively eligible include a high-speed fiber broadband network in a rural area where providers have historically been hesitant to go because of cost, or a fiber municipal broadband network in a low-income urban neighborhood where a majority of residents don't have meaningful access to broadband because current options are unaffordable, or a fiber-based Wi-Fi build-out that provides high-speed, reliable, no-cost or low-cost internet to households living in a building, say an affordable housing unit. And recipients are also encouraged to prioritize investments in fiber optic, require the offering of a low-cost option, and prioritize the funding of projects where broadband networks that are owned, operated, affiliated with local or tribal governments, nonprofits, or co-ops. And more information about broadband infrastructure projects can be found in the guidance. Next, I will be walking through digital connectivity technology projects, which are also vital to connect communities online. So here, CPF funds may be used to purchase and or install devices and equipment like laptops and Wi-Fi routers that facilitate robust broadband access that enables work, education, and health for community members who could not otherwise afford to access broadband services. And Treasury simplified the application process for presumptively eligible digital connectivity technology projects. An example of a presumptively eligible program here is a short or long-term loan program for libraries to loan out laptops to low-income families. Technologies like iPhones and televisions are not presumptively eligible under the Capital Projects Fund program. These devices may be eligible under a case-by-case review if they're determined to meet the statutory criteria. Now, providing funding to recipients that choose broadband infrastructure and digital connectivity investments is a key priority of the program, but Treasury has designed the program to allow recipients to have some flexibility to pursue other types of projects. So Treasury's third presumptively eligible use category is multi-purpose community facility projects. Multi-purpose community facility projects use capital projects funds to construct or improve buildings designed to jointly enable work, education, health monitoring, and address a critical need in the community. And eligible projects must directly and jointly enable all three activities, but additional functions or purposes like recreational programming are permitted. So some examples of presumptively eligible multi-purpose community facility projects include one, a full-service community school that provides academic, workforce training, and health monitoring programming, a library that provides public internet access for work, school, and health monitoring, among other additional resources like digital skills training. Another example is a community health center that, in addition to providing health monitoring, also offers a broad range of services, including education and career opportunities. And presumptively eligible multi-purpose community facility projects will also move through a simplified process, so long as they meet the criteria. Next, for all other projects, recipients will need to choose that will need to show that they meet the statutory requirements on a case-by-case basis. So here, recipients may propose other uses for capital projects fund grant funding. Any project that is proposed for case-by-case review must meet the three criteria that we outlined earlier. Number one, the project must invest in capital assets designed to directly enable work, education, and health monitoring. Number two, the project must be designed to address a critical need that results from, was made apparent, or exacerbated by the COVID-19 public health emergency. And number three, the project must be designed to address a critical need in the community to be served by it. And more details on this case-by-case review process can be found in the guidance. Finally, I want to discuss presumptively ineligible uses of capital projects fund grant funding. First, I want to mention that general infrastructure projects such as highways, bridges, transit systems, and ports are presumed to be ineligible. Additionally, the general construction and improvement of hospitals or traditional schools is not presumed to be eligible under the Capital Projects Fund program. There may be opportunities for such projects to receive funding if they demonstrate that they directly and jointly enable work, education, health monitoring, and such projects would be reviewed through the case-by-case basis. Treasury also encourages all tribal governments to look at this funding in tandem with other American Rescue Plan programs, including the state and local program, which has a more varied set of eligible uses. And now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jeremy, who is going to walk through the application process. Jeremy?
All right, thanks, gang. I'm going to walk you through the application process for tribal governments. So hopefully this will be helpful, and we'll start here. So first, let's talk about the application itself. All applications must be completed no later than June 1st, 2022. Big box at the bottom of this slide. In order for an application to be complete, you might need to submit some supplemental materials such as designation letters. I'll talk more about that in detail in a minute. And there's also some additional steps you need to take after you apply before you can access the funds that we're about to talk about. We've worked pretty hard to make the application process user-friendly. We're leveraging the same tech platforms that we used for some of the other Treasury ARP programs. So many of you may already be receiving funding from one of our other programs like the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. And so you might have familiarity with these platforms. The application consists of several parts. First, to access the application, you'll need to register for ID.me. Some of you may have completed an application for one of these other programs and you've done this already. If so, you can use your same ID.me login if you have it. Otherwise, ID.me registrations are person specific. So if you've never logged into a Treasury portal before, you're going to have to create one of these accounts. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes. It involves using a webcam to show your documents to a representative to verify your identity. Fortunately, you only have to go through this process once. Many of you have probably done it already, as I said, and we've provided resources on our website that can help troubleshoot if any issues arise. If you do have any major problems, you can certainly contact us and we'll help you work through it. So after you do the ID.me process, you'll have to complete an application on our portal. This will provide information that establishes applicant eligibility, indicates an award amount, describes how you intend to use your CPF grant funding. We estimate that the application should take about 2 hours to complete, but if you have all of your information ready, it may take much less time than that. I'm going to walk you through a few screenshots here shortly to show you different key components. After the information in the application is complete, you have to certify that the information provided is accurate. The certification must be done by the duly authorized tribal representative or a similar leader who has the legal authority to submit the application and enter into agreements on behalf of the tribal government. The certification may also be completed by an authorized representative of the tribal government, and I'll discuss that shortly. Once the application is submitted, we may ask you additional questions to clarify or correct issues in your application, and you should plan to respond to our questions as quickly as you can. Finally, you'll be required to sign and enter into a legal agreement with Treasury that binds you as the recipient to the terms of the program. And if you haven't had an opportunity to access the portal yet, I want to take this time to walk you through the application looks like so that it's clear how some of these steps I just outlined can be completed. Most of this is pretty straightforward. So let's go to the next slide here, and I think we get our first screenshot. You can access the link to the portal right through our website. It's treasury.gov/CPF for Capital Projects Fund. Real easy to remember. You'll find the link buttons. They'll say something like apply for the Capital Projects Fund in a few different places on our website. Again, should be easy to find. And it will take you to this ID.me section, which I just discussed. Once you have your login, you'll complete it here, and you'll be taken to the portal homepage. The next slide here. So this is our portal homepage, and this portal covers many of the Treasury ARP programs. So you'll see a few different options, and it can be a little complicated the first time you're here because, again, it pertains to more than just the Capital Projects Fund. First visit, you'll want to click Start a Submission. That's the circled button at the top right. But at any time you come back later, you can return to your application if you didn't finish it by selecting Go to Your Reports at the bottom. Or if you've already submitted your application, you log back in here and click Go to Your Reports, and you'll see the current status of your application as it moves through the Treasury review process. Once you click that Start a Submission button, you get a couple of drop downs. You select Yes to say that you want to apply for the CPF program, and then for probably everyone on this webinar, you're going to select tribal government as your applicant type. And as soon as you do this, you're going to get an email from us telling you that your application was created. You're going to get a lot of emails from us as you move through this process. We're only showing you this one just as an example of what to look out for. The links and contact information in each email should be pretty much the same in all of them. And as a reminder, you should feel free to email or call us anytime with any issues that you have. Okay, so on this slide, I briefly mentioned this authorized representative concept earlier, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here. There are two types of authorized representatives. One is within your own tribal government. A tribal leader can give permission to another member of the organization to sign the application on their behalf. You'll need a document that shows the tribal leader has given another member of the organization permission to sign the application and enter into an agreement on behalf of the tribe. The other possibility is only relevant if you are applying on behalf of one or more other tribal governments. So, for example, if you are a consortium or other joint tribal organization. If that's the case, you will need to obtain a designation letter showing that the tribes you are applying on behalf of have given you authority to act on their behalf. You'll fill this page out appropriately, depending on your particular circumstances. And on tab 5 at the end of the application, you'll have an opportunity to upload any designation letters or other appropriate documentation to show this relationship. Let's first start with the authorization within your own tribal government. In this case, the authorized representative is the person who will sign the certification and submit the application on behalf of your tribe, on behalf of your tribal organization, excuse me. The authorized representative is not necessarily the person who's filling out this online portal. You'll tell us on this page if the authorized representative is duly authorized by virtue of their position, such as duly authorized tribal representative, or if they have been granted permission by leadership to sign the CPF application. In the first case, it's the top checkbox. In the second case, it's the second checkbox. If specific permission has been granted for capital projects funds, you'll need to submit a designation letter, as I mentioned. This entire process is really important because we need to make sure that no one applies on behalf of your tribal government without your permission. And those bottom two drop-downs on this page are asking for information about whether or not you're applying on behalf of just your own tribal government, or if you are a tribal consortium or joint tribal organization applying on behalf of one or more tribal governments. In all of these cases, if you're a tribal government or a tribal consortium applying on behalf of other tribal governments, you do need to submit a document that states that you have permission to do this, to apply on behalf of the other tribal government. It's a lot of text and it seems a little complicated, but what it all boils down to is providing us with enough documentation so that we know that you have permission to apply on behalf of the tribal government for which you're completing the application. Let's take the next slide. So we're not showing you screenshots for all of these intermediate steps here, but we're going to be collecting information about all of the entities involved. The primary contact information screen is going to collect contact information for the person who's filling out the online portal. You can also add additional point of contact email addresses. The applicant information is where you will identify the tribal government that is applying for funding. You'll provide basic information for that entity, and this should match your SAM.gov registration. The authorized representative information is where you provide contact information for the person who will be signing the certification to submit the application. Generally, this will be the same person who also signs your agreement, so they need to have permission to enter into agreements on behalf of your tribal government. Additional eligible entities is identifying information for any other tribal governments that you are applying on behalf of. This will be almost exactly the same as the applicant information section that I mentioned. There's the second bullet point here, except that this information is used only if you are applying on behalf of more than one eligible tribal entity. So if you're a consortium, you'll have to fill in information for each entity that you're applying on behalf of. And finally, banking information is obviously information necessary for us to process payments. On the next slide, this page will automatically show you your capital projects fund allocation. This allocation amount for all eligible tribal governments is $167,504. If you're applying for more than one eligible entity, this will show you a different amount. So for example, if you're applying for 2 tribal governments, takes that amount and multiplies it by 2. You'll see $335,008. You can select here if you want to receive the full amount or not. We expect most of you will say that you do want to receive the full amount of funding, but you're allowed to request a lower amount. If you say no here, you'll be able to type in the allocation amount you receive. If you select yes, you'll receive the full amount. You'll also indicate here if you know how you plan to use capital projects fund grant funds. If you don't know how you'll select that you require additional time. Next slide. So the next section of the application is going to require you to tell Treasury how you intend to use your capital projects funds. We provide five options for using capital projects funds, and you'll need to select one or more of them to tell us how you intend to spend the money. The first 4 options are presumptively eligible uses, which means that assuming your project meets the requirements of each presumptively eligible use, the Treasury review will be lighter and faster. The presumptively eligible uses are described on this slide, but you can find much more detail about each of them in our published guidance on our website. The link is in the chat. You'll notice that the 4 presumptively eligible uses mirror Gang's eligible use discussion earlier during this presentation. Each of these choices requires the applicant to answer a few more yes or no questions, which I'll walk through with you shortly. You can also propose a use of funds that falls outside of the presumptively eligible uses. If you select this option, you'll need to demonstrate to us how your use of funds meets the program requirements described in the statute and the guidance. And Treasury will review these on a case-by-case basis and will contact you if more information is needed or if we need revisions. The extra review, as I mentioned, may take extra time, so it'll take a little longer for you to get your funds. You will also have the opportunity to indicate if you need additional time to determine how you would like to use your capital projects funds. And if you do need more time, that's fine, but you won't be able to certify and submit your application until you've figured out how you intend to use the funds. If you say you need more time, you'll be able to save your application and return to it later, but please remember that you all have to have everything submitted by June 1st of 2022. If you have any questions, we posted additional information and resources about the application process on our website, including an application checklist specifically for tribal governments, which is designed to help you move through the application process. And now let's step through a few screenshots that sort of put pen to paper here. So first, if you select, you see the list of 4 presumptively eligible uses and the 1 non-presumptively eligible use, the case-by-case use. You can select 1 or more of these, and we'll go to the next slide. So as you can see, here there's a checkbox where if you select that first checkbox, purchasing devices to be owned by the applicant, you see some additional questions, and depending on your answers, you might be asked to enter a few additional sentences of information. But basically, keep in mind that you're required to comply with all requirements of the guidance and your forthcoming grant agreement, even though many of those terms and requirements aren't directly addressed in this application. But it's designed to be pretty straightforward and simple, and you'll see that the information we're asking you for are simple drop-downs and maybe 1 to 3 sentences. Here, we're just going to flip through each of these, but here's the questions for digital connectivity technologies. So this would be equipment used to build Wi-Fi networks and similar things. You can see similar questions. Next. So for the broadband infrastructure option, we didn't put a screenshot up because the font was a little too small on the slide. This option looks a lot more complicated, but that's largely because there is an option here to use CPF money to supplement another federal government program. That's the gray box on your screen. So if you're doing that, just pay attention to this screen. Make sure that you give us all the information that's appropriate. And the next slide. If you plan to use funds for the construction or improvement of buildings, the questions are a little bit different. We're asking for more free responses. 1 to 3 sentences each is probably going to do it. The general description of the program and information about how the program will directly enable work, education, and health monitoring. All CPF projects must do all 3 of these things. And finally, if you'd like to propose, next slide. If you'd like to propose a use of funds that is not one of the identified presumptively eligible uses that I just discussed, you must describe the proposed use of CPF funds here. Treasury will review this information through its case-by-case review process that I talked about, and we might request additional information as needed to determine eligibility. We will probably require extra time to consider these proposed uses, and we recommend that you review the appropriate sections of the guidance before completing this section. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, who's going to talk about the opportunities our team has created to support you through the application process. I appreciate all of your time and attention.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. So we've partnered with Treasury and stood up an application liaison team that will provide a range of services aimed to improve your application experience. Treasury will be available to offer support to applicants as needed to help resolve issues and answer questions. We're also committed to developing and sharing helpful resources on our website, such as the Tribal Government Application Checklist. We'll also continue to take incoming questions from applicants using the Capital Project Funds email address, and you should see that here on your slide, and then we will also post it in the chat for you. It is also available on our website. NTIA, who we've partnered with and enjoyed a great partnership for the last several weeks as we've kind of coordinated on communicating about this program, will be offering support as well, including additional webinars and briefings like this one for a range of audiences, including the recipients, to provide information and opportunities to ask more questions. And then we'll also make sure and create and update a frequently asked questions document for reference by the applicants, which Adam will also be able to point you to, and then we'll have on our website at treasury.gov/CPF, and we'll have that link for you at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to provide you with some reporting requirements that we will have for you, and that will be coming out shortly. We'll just talk at a high level today, and then the rest of our time to answer questions that you all submitted in the chat. Next slide. So as indicated in the guidance, recipients will be required to submit ongoing reports regarding their use of the Capital Projects Fund grants and activities. Tribal governments will only be required to submit project and expenditure reports. So we've streamlined this process and tried to make it as simple as possible. These reports will include information about the types of projects being funded, project status, financial data, and other project-specific data. Tribal governments will submit these reports annually, and Treasury will be providing additional reporting guidance and instructions on reporting requirements at a later date. So that should be coming to you soon, but keep in mind an annual report and what we've outlined here on this slide. Now I'm going to hand it over to Adam so we can get started with the Q&A.